Ever looked at a Unity game object and thought, what are all these mysterious components? Today we're going to demystify these magical bits and bobs. Stick around as we dive into components and properties, explaining what they are, how to add them, and how to tweak them to make your game objects dance, fly, or just behave like a decent digital citizen. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay up to date with our latest game development tips and tricks. In this video we'll cover what components are, how to add them, and how to tweak their properties. Stay tuned until the end for a special tip on how to optimize your game objects. So what are components? Think of them as the building blocks of your game objects. They give your objects functionalities, kind of like toppings give a pizza its personality. Without components, your game objects are just empty shells, like a pizza with no toppings. Sad, right? Let's bring our game objects to life. Select a game object in the hierarchy. Let's go with our good old friend, the cube. Now, in the inspector window, let's come down here and let's click Add Component. Look at all these options. It's like a buffet of functionalities. First, let's add a box collider. For that, I will go to Physics and select Box Collider. Usually when you create a box, will come with this collider attached. This component defines the physical boundaries of our object. Without it, our cube would just fall through other objects, and that's no fun. Adjusting the box collider properties is a breeze. You can change the size, the center, or even turn on is trigger to allow for some fancy interactions without the physical collisions. It's like giving your cube superpowers. For the physics interactions to work properly, both interacting objects need colliders. So make sure that any object your cube will interact with also has a collider. Otherwise, they'll just pass through each other like ghosts in a haunted house. Now let's add a rigid body component to give our cube some physics. With a rigid body component, our cube is no longer just a boring block. It can fall, bounce, and react to forces, just like me after a long day of coding and a cup of coffee. With this component, our cube gains physical behaviors. It can fall, bounce, and interact with forces, making it much more dynamic. Now let's talk properties. These are just the settings of your components. Think of them as the dials and sliders that control how your components behave. For our rigid body, we have properties like mass, drag, and angular drag. Adjusting these changes how the cube will interact with the world. Let's tweak some properties. You can increase the mass and watch our cube hit the ground like a ton of bricks. But instead, let's just set the mass to 1 and then let's give it a try. Our cube has gravity. Let's just rotate it for a bit. Let's say like that, and then let's try that again. It will recalculate everything and it will fall. Now, instead of changing the mass, let's set the drag to, let's say 10 or any other higher value, and let's see what happens. I will press play again and our cube falls way slower. It's like moving through molasses. Experiment with angular drag and see how it affects rotation. It's like playing with the laws of physics without the messy lab coat. A pro tip: combine similar components. Instead of having multiple similar components attached to a game object, combine their functionalities into a single component where possible. This reduces the overhead of managing multiple components and streamlines your game object's behavior. For example, let's say that we have an empty game object and this one has 3 children, let's say all cubes. So let's create 3 more cubes, 3D cube and another one, and then let's make them kids of the game object and let's just move them slightly. So we have 3 more cubes, but every single one of them has a box collider. So I just said that we should combine similar components. So in this case, I will remove the box collider for all of my cubes and I will click on one cube, then go in the inspector window, right click on box collider and select remove component and do the exact same thing for the rest of those cubes. Now I will add the component on my game object. Let's select it and then add component, physics, and then let's select box collider. And also I want to remove the rigid body from my cube and add it on game object. Again, physics, rigid body. And now if I will press play, let's see what happens. My cubes fall as before. This way, if I want to change a property like the mass or the drag, I don't have to do that for every single cube. I will just do this for my main game object. And there you have it. Components and properties are what make your game objects tick. By adding and adjusting them, you can create all sorts of interesting behaviors and interactions. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe for more game development goodness, and leave a comment about your favorite component. Until next time, keep experimenting and keep creating.